Hello, everyone. So welcome. We are back for another career and spirituality conversation. My name is Julie Pone, for those who don't know me, and I support spiritual seekers having a career experience to reconcile what they do for a living with who they are as a soul. And to have that conversation today, I'm having Corrina Ryder, a beautiful, amazing woman who's doing something very unique. And I'm not going to spoil it now, but Corrina, how are you today?
Wonderful.
Yes.
Very, very happy to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm so excited because I don't know yet all of the subtleties of what you're doing. So I'm so excited to talk about it, to discover it with everyone. So, but as usual, before we launch into it, we just do a minute or so grounding. So let's launch into that. So for those who can, if you're driving a car, don't close your eyes. But if you can, just make yourself comfy, give yourself a little stretch, close your eyes. And let's for a second press our feet onto the ground, just to acknowledge the presence of the earth underneath us. Even saying a little thank you, connecting with it, grounding ourselves, and then bringing our attention back into the chest, the middle of the chest, into the heart. Maybe we can feel our heart. We can feel it beating. Maybe we can hear it even. Just for a second, let's connect with it. And then let's just breathe a little deeper and a little slower than we usually do. And let's take a couple of these lovely deep breaths together. Amazing. And the last out breath. Let's open our eyes. You're ready, and ta-da! Welcome again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Corrina. Corrina, you're a co-creative environment design and wellness practitioner.
Yes.
Yes, and there is a lot to unravel in this, just a couple of words. Uh, but before we talk about what, the the work that you do, I would love to know first what does spirituality mean to you? What's your relationship to spirituality?
Yes. For me, spirituality is actually pretty simple. Well, it's simple in a very complex way.
Oh, I love it.
I
Simple in a very
see it as a process
Mhm.
and a process of understanding or awakening to, as well as the continuous cultivation of your relationship in your physical self, yourself as a human being in a physical world, with that relationship to your soul,
Mhm.
and as well as that relationship to the total cosmic of everything. And it's the process of relearning what that is to you, where are you, what's the connection. And we each get to experience that process in a very unique way. I think that's my answer for what spirituality is. Um,
I love it.
it's something, yeah, I think we all go through it regardless if we know it or not.
Yeah.
It's part of being here.
Yeah. It's like finding our place, understanding our place in the bigger picture,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
how we relate to the bigger picture and to the smaller picture in a
To
way.
this, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And how those relate to each other and where what um
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think the concept of life in itself is spiritual. I mean, it's a spiritual experience. It is spirituality.
Yeah.
And becoming aware of that process is
Yeah.
our, yeah.
Yeah, because I got a little spark there because yeah, it's the process of life. Living is spirituality. Because if we are not incarnated in here, if it means that we are in spirit. So like if we're at the spirit state, spirituality has no I bet I bet spirit, I bet when we're in spirit state, we are not talking about spirituality because that's what's the state
Right,
that we are in. Maybe
right.
maybe they're talking about I wonder what talking about humanity. I don't know. I don't know what they're talking about, but
They're just observing.
yeah,
There's no, they don't, yeah.
they're probably not trying to understand, like the yes, being a spirit when you're one. But yeah, well, I don't know. That's all. That's all wide assumptions. And yeah. So that makes sense. Living a connection to life, and yeah, and so I think it's a great segue to talking about how
What,
that shows up into your work. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, it is my spiritual journey that brought me to my work. And I think that's actually, I think it might be the key to finding your, so many people are trying to find their soul's purpose.
Mhm.
Um, and what it is they're here for, what's my dream job, what's my, why am I here? Um, and I think it's actually about embracing the spiritual journey that will take you to that. It'll eventually unfold for you in that.
Mhm.
Um, I I would consider 2016 as the beginning of my conscious uh, my awareness of that I am setting out on a spiritual journey.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, I mean, my definition of spirituality, I think is sort of the definition of life. So I think we all spiritually connected at some level at all time, even if we're aware of it or not. And I think my when I was young, very as a child, I think I was uh, aware. I had hippie parents who raised me without uh, being forced on any religion. They let me explore my own and have my own journey there. But I spent a lot of time outdoors. And and I think there's something about Mother Nature just naturally you there's no way to not be connected when you're spending a lot of time in nature and a lot of time outdoors. Um, but then as a teenager and then growing through my 20s and 30s, I was just actually as a teenager, I went through a phase of being an atheist. I just
Mhm.
and then into my 20s and 30s, just didn't put a lot of thought into it. Really just focused on my social life and going to school and working and being just living. Um, and so it was in 2016, I finished grad school at UCLA for landscape architecture.
Mhm.
And without going into details, too much details. It was a point in my life when I thought I expected when I finished school that everything was going to fall into place, especially being grad school. I really thought, I'm going to find that a dream job. I'm going to be making lots of money. I'm going to be, with that American dream or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I thought it was all going to happen, and it didn't at all. I actually do talk about, I tell my story on my podcast. So if you want to hear more of all of this stuff, I do recommend listening to that. So 2016, I was in LA and I was living in Long Beach, and I realized that it wasn't where I wanted to be. I was having a hard time finding a good paying job, even though I had this graduate degree. And I that was when I started. I'm not even sure why I decided to start talking to the universe.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the first time in my life I guess I would consider praying, where I was intentionally calling to something above, and something out there.
Yeah.
And I was taking walks on the beach regularly, and I was opening up a conversation. And that was when I met Metatron. Was one of the Archangel Metatron came into my life, and I started researching who he was and and wanted to learn more about the story of who he is. And it made a lot of sense why that was somebody I was connecting with. I was also that's around the time I started listening to Abraham Hicks and
Mm-hmm.
started understanding the laws of the universe. And so I ended up in 2017. I decided to put my faith in the into just to asking for direction, because I really wasn't sure what I was supposed to do. So I sold everything. For the most part, almost everything I owned, got rid of everything. Shipped off some boxes to my father to store for me, and I took a motorcycle trip by myself. I'm an avid motorcyclist, and I packed up some stuff on my motorcycle, and I just decided to just travel, and ended up traveling. It was for a month, and then I got sick, and it was really difficult to be traveling solo on a bike, exposed out in the air every day when you're not feeling well. So I decided that the universe was saying, go rest.
Yeah. Make a stop
um,
somewhere.
yeah, yeah. So I ended up back in my hometown and spent a year there. I was really confused because I wasn't sure, and I was I continued to apply for all these jobs that I thought were going to be my dream job, and nothing was panning out.
What type of
And
jobs were you applying for? Was it for design?
landscape architecture jobs, and because that's my graduate degree is in landscape architecture, and so getting landscape design and landscape architecture positions. I have my undergraduate degree is in theater scenic design. So I wanted to do really creative spaces like parks, like children's parks and even amusement parks. Um, the things like that were the positions I was hoping to get. And so I also started really getting more and more into my spiritual journey. So when I was a teenager, I was interested. Had tarot cards, and I was really interested in crystals, and also very fascinated with this. Started when I was around 15 years old. I became aware that my dream state, I have very vivid dreams, very realistic. Well, realistic looking, but I've traveled to other worlds. I mean, I have a whole nother life in my dream state.
Wow, yeah.
Um, and
Astral traveler. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yes. And I at that point started studying dream analysis and really interested in understanding my subconscious mind. So that I started doing a lot of that stuff again. I started reading cards. I Ching is another divination form I use. Again, I was meditating and had continued this conversation, this regular connecting with the universe and with different guides, meeting different entities that to me, it's communication. I mean, it's not like there's somebody sitting next to me that I'm talking to, but I can ask for information and receive it back. And that's part of what has led to what I'm doing now, is becoming aware that the physical world actually is constantly giving you messages at all times. Your surroundings is a direct reflection of who you are, of what your energy is. It's reflecting back an equivalent, just in a different form.
When you say, like, you're getting messages, is it like is it like clairaudience or something, like tuning into a frequency, and different frequency are different entities, so to speak, that are...
Sometimes, but sometimes it's also what, like, the physical world giving you message. So and this is what I do working with people is, so gets into what I was talking about with the dream analysis. And so in doing dream analysis and dream interpretation, you are given symbols in your brain, right? And you see images in your dreams that symbolize different things for you. I've come to realize that our actual physical world carries those same symbols for you. And it's just tuning into
Yeah,
how do you see yourself in something else? There's, things like color, different colors vibrate different energies. And so they can affect your mood.
yeah.
Then that's just one example. The other thing is, so this is an example I use with dream analysis. Let's take a bee, like a honeybee, for example. To somebody who's deathly allergic to a honeybee, a bee may represent something dangerous, something to be fearful of, something that could be, hurt you. But to a beekeeper, that same bee could represent their livelihood. It actually represents success and money and abundance. And so two different people may have the same thing could represent something completely opposite. So this interpreting your world is really an individual's interpretation, like, and that's something. So I had learned young, when 15, 16, first was interested in learning about, well, interpreting my dreams. And I remember buying a dream dictionary and being like, well, that it doesn't make any sense for me. A little later, I ended up buying a book that it was actually a workbook that helped you create your own dictionary of what symbols mean for you. And I'm like, okay, this is making sense. So moving to what I'm doing now with people and their environment, it's not just dreams, it's not just your subconscious state. Like, we are creating, you are constantly creating your environment. You're not, you're creating your health. So this is another level of it. The people are waking up to understanding that their physical body will reflect ailments, right? Or vice versa. If you're healthy and doing well and your body feels really good, your mind feels really good. You're in a positive space mentally. The emotions, the negative emotions can affect your body, and you can end up with ailments in your body because of
Pollution from the mind
the
being...
negative. Right, the negative thoughts and the emotions happening. So I started to realize, and I can get more into this story because it's my spiritual journey has led me to understand this and to create what I'm doing now, and it helped me connect these dots. But so your physical world is like the next layer of the onion. Like, your body is one layer of reflecting what's happening up here, and it shows you, like, if you're aching somewhere, like, what is it what's causing that deeper than inflammation? Like, why do you have the inflammation? Okay, too much sugar. Why are you eating too much sugar? There's that addiction. Why do you have that addiction? And really going into it. So I started to realize that this is happening where, and we really are creating your physical surroundings. You by what you're doing, the choices you're making in your brain are affecting what's happening to your body, and then which is affecting what's happening to the physical world around you. And it's something that we are not taught about. I mean, and that's all the year, my whole life, I've been studying as an artist and designer since I was 10, 11 years old, maybe even younger. I mean, I've always known myself as a creative. And I never realized how powerful I am with that. And
Mm.
that was part of, so back to this journey. I know I'm jumping around,
Yeah, no
but
worries.
yeah, let me know if I lose you. Um, so I had finished this motorcycle tour, brought me back to my hometown. I knew that, it was I was had a wonderful time being near my father again for a while, but it just wasn't where I was supposed to be. So I kept going. But over this time, like I said, I started reconnecting to these spiritual practices and technique, doing, bringing this relationship back into my life. And that is actually when I it was in 2017, 18, I think it was 2018 was when I got introduced to the concept of the Akashic records
Oh,
and started practicing and learning about that. Also, through all of this, I was studying more about the 12 laws of the universe and the 7 hermetic principles, and really trying to understand those and how do I put those into place in my life. And at the end of 2019, so mind you, all of this time, I still hadn't found that dream job I was looking for.
yeah.
I was doing a bunch of other things, but still hadn't landed the dream job. And actually, let me go back. The beginning of 2019, it was the beginning of the year. I was like, I'm doing something wrong. This isn't like, there's obviously, I'm not aligned with this. I'm not manifesting this. What am I doing wrong? And so I said, I'm going to stop every day I wake up with this idea that I'm going to create my dream. I'm going to find my dream job. And I said, you know what? I'm done with this. Instead, my approach is going to be manifesting and creating my dream life.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let the career fall into place. And so, and I was like, this is, what do I have to do to create my dream life? Don't worry about the career anymore. So by the end of 2019, I moved again. I moved to Dallas. Um, a friend of mine with her and her partner were going to be traveling a lot over the next 6 months. So they're like, come stay with us, or, you can stay here. We have a bedroom that you can have your own place. And that way, while we're traveling, we have somebody to keep an eye on our home. Um, so I moved there. I'm like, Dallas is a booming city. There's a lot going on. At that point, I'm like, I'm just going to start my own business. Um, I went down, I started landing clients right away. Seemed so easy. I'm like, this is so awesome. I'm going to do and then March of 2020 came along, and we all know the world changed. I mean, it changed everything so dramatically, so quickly. Um, which then I ended up by June of 2020. I was in a city that the only people I knew were my friends. And so 2 people, I met a couple of these new clients, but they're all like, no, we're not moving forward with any projects. At that point, I knew, so I had decided that I wanted to create my dream life. And my dream at that time, I'm like, I want to live in an RV and travel. I want to create a business that I can work from home, but I want my home to have wheels and I want to be able to just go travel for a while. Because on my motorcycle tour, had the time of my life. And I have so many stories in that alone. Um, and the connecting I was doing with the universe. So I was like, I want to do this again, but traveling on a motorcycle is really difficult. It's very taxing to the body, and it's also not necessarily the safest thing to do, especially being a woman alone. So, although I didn't have any problems at all. But was like an RV. I can then I have a roof over my head. I'm good. And that was my dream. So, and it's one of those things you got to, you put your intentions out there, the universe will provide. It just almost always looks a little bit different than you expected.
Yeah.
So 2020, the pandemic had started. We're 3 months into the pandemic. My time up with my friends, staying, they have had other family play. It's the pandemic. Things, I'm like, I got to get out of here, but I'm in a city where how am I going to get an apartment? I'd lost my clients. I don't have any income coming
Yeah.
in. Like, I don't know anybody. I don't know. So I was like, well, it's not quite what I was expecting, but instead of an RV, what I can afford right now is a van. So I'm going to try the whole van life thing. And I bought a van and I put everything. I mean, at that point, I didn't own much because I had left everything when I first left LA. I hadn't really, and went on this motorcycle trip. I didn't realize when I left LA that this journey that I thought I was going to go on for a couple months ended up being years and years. But um, so June of 2020, I ended up in a van and started traveling. And I was living out in nature. I was away from people. While everybody else was locked in their homes, I was one of the freest human beings on this planet. So
Uh,
I went from Texas I was in Colorado for a month. I was up in Wyoming for almost a month. I went to South Dakota, came down. I spent 3 months in Missouri living pretty much completely off grid. I had no electricity and no running water, and I lived in a pasture with horses on property. There was 39 acres. It was a farm for abused and abandoned animals. The woman who runs the place offered to let me stay there for free, just in exchange to all I had to do was spend time with the horses because she had noticed I originally had I booked the place for 2 nights. Um, and uh, she saw how I just had this immediate connection with the horses. And so she's like, I need some help. They just be there for them. There's, check on them. And I ended up grooming them regularly. And but that's what I did every day. I spent at least, some days it was an hour, some days it was many hours. But um, the pandemic is going on. No, and here I am living out in this wilderness, 39 acres. There was a creek. There was this beautiful, just forest, hillsides. It was amazing, and all of this. I had multiple spiritual experiences when I was in Colorado. I had an experience where I was connecting with a past life. When I was in Missouri, I had a connection with my ancestors. They came and I had this whole experience. Could feel them. It was amazing. And I mean, there's some things to be said with living out in the nature for 3 months. I had no way to heat water except for making a fire. So I was,
oh,
every day I was eating off of, a campfire and showering outside. It was just, it shifted my energy. It shifted who I was. I'm a totally different person now. And I started really connecting with the physical world and back to how the world communicates to me. and to all of us, once you start becoming aware of it, beyond just things like clairvoyancy, but there's like I was saying, messages, things like when you find a feather on the ground, that's a gift for you. That's there for you. That's a message for you. And there's what I've been doing is training myself to start what was I thinking about
Mhm.
at the time that came into my life, or something special that catches your eye. Maybe it's a stone or a bone or something, or and that's in nature. When there's sometimes you're in an urban environment, it's something else.
Mhm.
But start to pay attention to those things that caught your eye. Why is it? Why are you connecting with that? What's happening in your brain at that moment? Because there is nothing. There's not anything in this time in your life that's happening just coincidentally. The word coincidence to me it doesn't make any sense. We live in synchronicity. Everything is happening because of the energy. It's happening it's ontology. It's the concept that you are what you are at every moment. There's the equivalent of at the same time. So what you're doing, what you're thinking, what you're being is is creating your everything, about from your physical body to the extended physical environment you're in, and vice versa. At the same moment that your environment is also, and your body is also directly affecting your brain. And it's all one. It's a oneness. We think it's separate. And that's why I say I'm an advocate for bringing environment into the mind, body, and soul equation, because I think it's a really important piece. And I think it's one of the pieces that for some reason, we're separating ourselves so much from the physical world, and that it's just mind, body, soul. And I'm like, no, that is, we are, but we're just as much also the environment. And I truly believe, and this is not a concept that I created. There's actually an Incan tribe that I heard something very similar. But the idea that if we focus on our own individual well-being, and that is mind, body, soul, and environment, but focus and work on your own wellness, that will extend out to the wellness of the next person, of the next town, of the next, of the ultimately the whole earth, ultimately the whole universe. And in the past couple of years, I've started to hear, that there are people who are suffering from climate anxiety, and they're so worried because we're bombarded with these things that we're hearing, that we as human beings are harming the planet, or the planet's going to be destroyed because of these things that we're doing. And I'm not saying that that's not the case, but I think that people are getting overwhelmed on levels that are beyond their control. And I'm like, bring it back home. You can control your own wellness. You can take responsibility of your own wellness, and you can take responsibility of your own property. And how are you creating that wellness within your property? And it's not just things like recycling, or, it's also about building that relationship and having a healthy relationship with your environment. And I mean, I literally sometimes talk to my things, and I look at my world as an extension or reflection of who I am, and you can see yourself in other things. Like, for instance, even the different materials, they have different energies to them, literally the frequency that they're vibrating, but also just the feelings that you get. Like, wood feels and looks very different than metal, and or stone, or a grass lawn, like, or you know, the texture of a even the texture of cotton versus wool, right? There's a different energy there. Um, and it's when you really start taking the time to go inwards of like what really feels right for me, what really feels right, not just what's trendy, not just what's, you know, what somebody else says is cool, but what really resonates for me. And that's where, so as I'm realizing all of these things and I'm putting all these dots together of all of this, you know, this spiritual path I'm on, and then these knowledge that I have as a designer, I started to realize I'm like, I don't know if I can actually design for people anymore because I know that their wellness, but so in the design process, I would typically before I would sit down with a client and listen to what they want and what you know and what's right or there's a whole process there. And then I go back to my office and sit down and create I would project what I had learned and what I thought was best for them onto their space.
Mm.
And I realized I'm like, it's actually more empowering for somebody and they can have better results with their wellness in their space if I allow my clients to design their spaces for themselves. And instead of me designing, it's more I guide people through the process. And I guide people through the process of building that relationship as well. And so it's not just we're going to sit down and figure out a layout of your room, but it's connecting your inner and outer worlds and really making those have the best reflection of themselves, have the best communication with each other, the best relationship to each other. But also, how does that look well? Like, what's the wellness in that? That's kind of the first concept of it. But then I break it down into sensorial storytelling and spiritual design. And to me, though, so sensorial storytelling is it's storytelling through using all of your senses. And I go beyond just the five senses because we all have intuition. We all have an inner knowing. We all have some level of clairvoyant of the clairs.
Yeah.
And it's especially when you start working on it and really connecting with the physical world, you become more, you're like, oh, wow, I really do have, you know, I'm more in tune with my world than I realize. And when you, especially when you start practicing these techniques that I have for people, the methodology that I've created, I really feel like I've co-created with the universe because through this whole process, I have maintained this communication with my guides and stuff, and I feel like they've guided me in a lot of this. So sensorial storytelling, it's a two-way relationship because it's you and the other layers of you, but it's finding what your true story is and what is, if you were a character in a play, what is your story? How does it get expressed? So let's say we look at your environment as your stage. Like what really works for expressing to the world who you truly are. But it's also the other half of that is listening to the existing stories that are in the space.
Yeah.
Because the space, like I said, it's affecting you as well. So it's taking that time to really research and get to know your environment and what are the pre-existing stories, and some of that means doing some history research, but some of it, this is where I brought I'm also a certified Akashic Records practitioner. And I do work with using the Akashic Records to help learn more about the space because sometimes you don't have a historic records of the home or whatever. And maybe it's an object, but we can go into the Akashic Records and access information.
Actually,
Um,
do you mind
oh,
if that the Akashic record is also something that's in my world that I'm
please.
practicing? Yeah, but so maybe shall we give a little definition for people who maybe have never heard of it before we, because
Yes.
it makes sense to me, and I'm like, yeah, 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 and then I realize maybe not everyone knows. So can
Yes,
you
yes.
really-
Yeah, yeah. So the Akashic records, so Akasha is a Sanskrit word for essentially for ether, for the cosmos of everything, all universes, everything of existence. And so the Akashic records is, I kind of see it as an energy. Some people like to think of it as a library, but it's a collection of all thoughts, all experience through all time and space and time. It's all in all universes, and so it's records of everything that has ever existed and exists or will exist in the future, because like there's the time is something we create. So, although you can go into time space in the Akashic records. Um, so it is
Do you think
um
we can tune into the field, the Akasha, in order to retrieve some information?
correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So when working with my clients with designing the space, so you don't necessarily have to want to design your space to work with me. And I also work with people more on if you want to focus more on the building the relationship, and actually even design clients, we start off with the relationship first. And oh, I'm sorry, what?
Which relationship? The relationship.
The relationship between the inner and outer world, and really just understanding, starting to build an understanding of how the world's speaking to you. And that's, I have on the podcast Environmentally You, by the way. I don't think I've said that. So the name of my podcast is Environmentally You. And I do have 3 exercises now that I actually ask people to listen to those before working with me, or if you want to do them with me, we can do that too, but you might as well do something for free because it's on the
Yeah.
podcast. So uh yeah, so it's, and so developing the relationship, and so listening to the stories, sensorial storytelling, so listening to the stories that are pre-existing in the space, and then figuring out what your story really, what, and it's a lot of being honest, like who are you really, what is the best reflection, even, and it'll help you when you're at the store and you're tempted to buy something, like, oh, that's the cutest little pillow and I want it, but it's like, why do you really, is that really who you are? And making those decisions in your environment of what really resonates true to who you are or who you want to be, because you can also change by changing your environment. You can make it will help change you to something else.
And sorry, Corrina, you said that your our environment is our stage to express
Oh
ourselves,
yes.
and but also the space had pre-existing stories. How does it work, the merging of the two? Is there some incompatibility sometimes, or is there some, do you realize sometimes, or do the clients realize sometimes that the space doesn't align, or they can't align with that space? Or then is there that you're doing some sort of clearing to make the space neutral so that the new can come in? What,
Yes.
there's
Well,
some.
and it's the same way that you would be sitting if you were having therapy with you and another human being, you have to figure out a compromise, right? Or you have to figure out what can work for both of you. And so
Oh,
there
you're-
is
so you're laying
the
on the couch, except where does the couch lie on for the session?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, so it's figuring out what works for you, and then there's figuring out what works for the space, and figuring out what the compromise is. Or if you if you're really, I mean, some people just don't want it, they want it their way, and that's that. And that there's another thing, I'm not the right designer for everybody, because I put it back onto my clients. Really, it's my clients doing the designing. The trade-off there is I'm helping empower that my clients to as creator, rather than putting, I mean, that's a lot to give off to somebody else. This is your opportunity to create. Like, we have to, we're, as human beings, we're just coming back into realizing how powerful we are, and how much the magic that each of us has. And that's what I was realizing for me as a designer. I'm like, I might be, putting my foot in my mouth by doing this and telling people, I'm not going to design anymore, but I'm still designing. I'm helping other people figure out what their true expression is, and then how can we implement that into your home. Because of the knowledge I have with such an extensive design background, I can help people say, this might be a better solution or not. And I am okay with people saying, you know what, Corrina, I appreciate your suggestions, but I'm going to do it my way, because that's what it's really all about. I mean, you're living in your home, not me.
Yeah.
So I feel, one thing is, I really feel like this is my soul's mission. Like, I feel like this has come to me because I'm supposed to be helping people in this way, and that this is um but I really do think that this is something of the way things are moving and shifting. I mean, there's so much about, us just starting to really go back to taking responsibility for ourselves, and taking responsibility of what we are creating, rather than blaming it on the neighbor, or blaming it on the government, or blaming it on whatever it is. Take responsibility for what you're creating. And so the other part of that was the spiritual design. And what I mean by that is, the process of wellness is part of the spiritual path. And so there's a spiritual aspect to this approach that I'm doing, working with people. And as it's important to be grateful for your physical body, there's a lot to be said for having different ceremonies for yourself. And even, something like a birthday is even a ceremony that you're it's celebrating your person, right? And so I very much encourage and help people figure out what are different rituals and ceremonies that you can bring into your home and into your daily life, and that are with you in your relationship to the physical world. And it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be something that seems witchy or woo-woo. It may just be like, as you walk through the front door every day, or out the front door, or whatever it is, you just say thank you for this wonderful home. The same way you would say thank you to the food meal that you're about to eat. It's just really working on building an actual relationship with the world around you. And like I said, you start to see the messages, you start to build, there really is communication that starts to happen, just as we're learning how to communicate with our mind, body, and soul.
I like what you're saying, and like there is a trend of being so preoccupied by the state of the earth at large, that we are probably so preoccupied by that we are taking for granted our direct environment, our direct surrounding. So it's the same way that we say, like, be the change you want to see in the world. Well, it starts with taking that responsibility, taking control and responsibility over what we have around us.
Right.
So yeah, I
Right.
very much like that. Yeah. Yeah, because I realized as you're talking, there has been time that I would be, talking to my plants or and then there are times that, you're kind of like taken away by the routine and taking everything for granted. Even sometimes not being very nice to the furniture, you know?
Exactly. And so, and that's actually in one of the things I think it might be in my very first episode I say is, the way, start looking at the way that you treat your space as the way you're treating yourself.
Mm.
And, and people just sometimes when you get mad, you kick a chair,
Yeah.
and or whatever. And there's some in that action of doing that, and it's not like your chair feels it. We all know it's not about
Mhm.
physically feeling it, but there's something, energy that's created in that. It immediately comes back at you, and so, and when you start building this respect for
Yeah.
your space, as though it's your, I'm going to respect my space the same way I want respect for myself. Um, you, it change, and it's those little things that make you just, it makes it easier to like clean up after yourself, and to do the dishes and to do those little things, because you're like, well, it's almost like pampering yourself a little bit too, and the other thing I say to people too, like, start recognizing things like when you accidentally spill something, like say you spill your cup of coffee and you're like, oh, it just can ruin your day. Like, oh my gosh, I'm late for something and now I have to clean the coffee up. Take a deep breath and ask, why did that just happen? Besides the fact that your mind is somewhere else, so you're going too fast. But pay attention to, like, where did the coffee actually spill? Because sometimes I've started to notice that sometimes there's a reason why I was called to, like, I'll go to clean it up and I'll have to pick up the rug and I'm like, oh, there's that pen I've been looking for 3 months, or whatever. There's something,
Yeah.
there's often something, like something will actually lead you to something else. Or maybe it just, for some reason, that corner of the room needs, it's like, I want attention. I feel you haven't paid any attention to me. And then you might want to ask, like, what does that corner of the room represent? Like, was there something that's, and there's, uh, and that this is actually gonna, just reminded me. Some people have asked me um, if I teach feng shui, and yeah,
This is
and
my next question. I've been thinking about it for a
yeah,
while.
and I I have some knowledge of it, and I do incorporate some things sometimes. Um, and if it's the right thing for a client, if a client resonates with that, I'm like, let's look at the layout of the, and it might be appropriate for you. But not everybody, and that's what I think feng shui is just, it's sometimes it's only right for certain people, because it align with what you feel, with what you believe in. And then sometimes it's restrictive, I feel it. And sometimes the remedies that are offered may just not fit with what uh, what you want your space to look like. So there's other, I encourage people to sometimes, like, use that as a reference point, and like, and then kind of how can we tweak it to be appropriate for you. Or use a little bit here and there, but don't feel like you have to fully do your whole home following feng shui unless you want to, if you're called to do that. And that's when, like, if something like that comes up with a client and they find something in the process of working with me that they're really called to, I am happy to say, why don't we research a good feng shui designer for you
Mhm.
and find somebody that you can, and I'll let you go and you can go work with this person if that's what really works for you. Um, because sometimes it's other things like using the medicine wheel, for instance, like the four directions, which we often with doing landscape work, because then that's I do work with people with interior of their home as well as exterior of homes. Um, you're the plants are very much directed by the direction and they some plants aren't going to live on the north side of your home and they're just not going to survive there. They need more sun. So sometimes you're using the medicine wheel even not even knowing it because that's the natural
Yeah,
uh
since instinctive for some.
needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I think the majority of people have some ideas already of what they're drawn to spiritually. But some people, if you don't, I mean, that, again, working with me, I am happy to help people explore those sort of things and come up with some suggestions and do a little bit of research if we have to and see what we might even discover something new. and
It's
um
fascinating, but it makes so much sense. And I remember like years ago, I met a doctor who was very unique, and he would come to people's homes because he would be testing. He would need to see the person in their environment because their environment was having a direct impact on their health.
yes.
No, and I said there's no point in seeing people in an office because they're going to describe some symptoms, and then maybe I'm going to come with in their house and then realize that the wall just behind their bed is there is their refrigerator, and then there is like disturbance and all that toxicity, some stuff that are in the home
Yes.
that is overlooked in every other area of medicine in a sense. So it makes
And
so much sense
it's
that
also
yeah. Mhm.
looking at things like, so okay, it's mold. Let's say mold, let's say somebody's having, congestion issues or whatever, and then you realize, well, there's mold in your home and that's most likely causing it. I like to go a little bit deeper with people too as to why might you be attracting mold? Like why and why? So because there's again, these are these little messages and clues that the physical world offers to us. Like why congestion? What's happening in your mind that's causing this part of your body to have a reaction? And why is it that mold, or what does mold represent? What is and we don't always come up with the answers, but or sometimes it's something that you don't realize until 5 years, 10 years down the line. But by bringing it to the conscious mind, I think you're allowing the discovery, the answer to that to come to you more easily. Um, oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
yeah, sorry to interrupt. And also, you're less of a victim then.
Yes.
You can take, then there is like power comes back.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yes. And there's, it's I mean, sometimes you're in a situation where there are people who have had to completely sell and move their home to a new place because the mold is so bad, right? And it happens. And that's where I'm like, there are people who are like, this is happening to me. My environment this is they blame it on the mold. They blame it on the mold is ruining my life. I have to sell my house or find a new apartment, whatever it is. Where I say to people, no, there's a reason why this is happening in your life. There's a reason why you invited the mold. And it's not the environment doing this to you. And it's so what's that relationship there and why is this happening? And so that you don't, because I think that a lot of people end up, if they blame it on the mold rather than taking responsibility of why they allowed the mold to be in their space, they move to a new place and they very well may have mold issues again, or have something that's going to cause that same feeling of
Yeah.
my environment is attacking me. It's causing me to have pain. Me developing all of this came from me seeing in my own wellness journey of this learning the connection to the body and my brain, and even experiences like being able to manifest something or a job that I want or whatever. I totally believe in that. And then I'm like, but why aren't people taking that into consideration with their physical environment? Like, why do we still, I mean, I still catch myself sometimes because it's so ingrained that you blame it on the environment. And I'm like, no, we're creating this. And we also have the power to heal the earth by healing ourselves. And as soon as we start healing ourselves and our relationship to and just like you would heal a relationship in therapy with your spouse, we need to heal this relationship that we have with the physical world, because I fully believe that this is how we will save the planet.
But you know, the parallel that you made with the molds, you know, like you're not looking at why we invited or attracted or why we were a vibrational match for the molds. And then we might move and and attract the same or something similar, of a similar energy somehow. It's exactly, since we are, you know, talking about career as well, it's like having issues at work and quitting, looking for a different job without doing any inner work about why we ended up in that particular situation that didn't work for us. And the likelihood of the same type of issue reproducing in the new job is quite high. It's like same gift, different wrapping paper.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it's even, you know, things like I've had people say, you know, I don't know why I always end up moving into another apartment with an annoying neighbor. There's always an annoying neighbor. And I'm like, well, there's an issue there within yourself that you need to figure out.
Yeah.
And then you'll resolve you don't even have to move,
Yeah.
you know, and it's the same thing. It's with a job. Like, why, you know, I always have this annoying boss. The bosses always suck. You know, well, why do you keep bringing that to the next job? You know, and so, yeah.
So Corrina, because I know we are like even, you know,
Oh my
slightly
goodness.
over time already, and like it's not a problem on my end. I want to make sure that you don't have an urgent appointment to get to.
No, I'm having fun. This is
Okay,
great.
so is it okay to keep talking for a time? You know,
Absolutely.
okay, awesome.
Yeah.
I love, you
Yeah.
know, I love it because, you know, when you're talking about the messages or like the interaction that we have with the environment, it also reminds me of Ho'oponopono when I studied, you know, Ho'oponopono, and at the end of the the first workshop, and even the people that are organizing the workshop, they're clearing the place that we are having the workshop in, so the room, the chairs, and then when we're having a break, we're going out of the room, because then like the energy that we're bringing in, we are contaminating the space, so they're cleaning the space. And then when you come back home after this, it really feels like everything's talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and I'm gonna admit myself that for a while I was very connected to it, and then we get you know, carried away into the flow of, you know, the
Yes.
life and
Yes.
routine, and sometimes taking it for granted. But as we're having this conversation, I guarantee, like, you know, so looking at it, my plant that's just in front of me, and it feels like she's looking at me as like, huh? Hello. I think I'm gonna have some amends to make to a couple of pieces of furniture that I may have, you know, been a bit kind of
It
be
it's it,
angry at or stuff like that. And but
it'll
so
feel good though, because you realize you're actually just you're apologizing to yourself and
yeah,
to you're forgiving yourself at the same and it's just the other thing I love about the environment and our things is that they do love you unconditionally.
yeah,
And it's something that when the things like, spilling your coffee or whatever, the things go wrong or that crack in the ceiling that you're just like, "Oh my God, what is happening?" Or the mold.
yeah,
You just have to keep in mind they're express there are opportunities to understand what's going wrong in your in with like where are you off in your wellness, where what because there it's a message to you, like, pay attention. What do you have in common with that mold? Why is it there? Like, really go into that, really. And some, I have lots of different techniques with people. I mean, people who are people who do dream a lot, I recommend asking that question, those sort of things as you go to sleep, because you frequently will get the answers there. Doing writing is huge. Doing, drawing things, going for walks with a meditative state of mind of, and it's opening that intention. Again, also doing Akashic records. I mean, you can go into the Akashic records and say, why the hell do I have all this mold? What is going on? Where's this connection here? So there's lots and lots. I mean, then that's just a couple of things. There's so many ways to get these answers. And it's even finding the proper remedies for things, because sometimes that can be overwhelming. Like, what is going to work? And sometimes it takes trying a few different things, just like natural medicines. Like, you may have a, let's say, allergies or something, and some people bee pollen works for, and some people need, something. There's all these different, or even having a common cold. There's, colloidal silver or echinacea or whatever, and these different remedies work for different people, because we're each vibrating individually. And so, but yeah, it's amazing when you start paying attention to, there's so much more available to us about ourselves than we
yeah.
give credit to. Um, and that's, I this past few years of my life have been extremely challenging in a lot of ways, but having created this methodology and having this awareness come to me and really deciding to go for it, I feel like it's my responsibility to share this wisdom that's come to me, because I really, really feel this will help a lot of people in their journeys within their wellness experiences and their desire to be more connected.
But like,
I
speaking of,
know.
uh, um, I knew I had an awareness that yes, how you treat your space is also a reflection of how you love yourself. But never have I had such an acute awareness of this, thanks to our conversation.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
self-love, like you wouldn't let your space, you don't do certain things to your space unless there is some loving wounds within yourself.
Yeah, I really think it's a huge part of the puzzle.
Yeah,
And it's one of those things, like, I'm very excited because there are so many people, me included, in this awakening process, and more humans are really getting into their spiritual process. And when listening to so many other people, I just recognize that people were leaving out the environment so often. It's really important. And I feel like, and I was thinking about I hear people speak about the ascension of mankind and how we're going to be leaving the physical world. And that's the transition of humans is eventually, and I was like, wait, we have so much to learn from it still. Like I don't think we're ready yet. Like I think that, and I think it will happen, but I think that people really need to, we can't, we're not going to just jump there without, you can't, we need to really be able to have closure with our physical experience before we can move on.
Well,
And
nothing's going to
it,
happen anytime soon, Corrina. I think we have a bit of time, no?
yes, yes. But the fact that people aren't really, I mean, it's I don't know of anybody else who is approaching the design, the idea of designing your space the way that this has come for me. And I would love to, the other thing, I just want to throw this out there on my podcast, which is fairly new, am looking for people who want to have conversations about, and so if people who are designing, people who are whatever, if you I'm open to talking with people about how they are cultivating their relationships with the environment and or helping others. um I don't think I'm the only one doing it. I just don't know of anyone else really doing this kind of work. And
This
that's
is
part of why I started the podcast, was to connect with people and to find people who are,
people who are working with the environment, and so to have discussion with them. Is that correct?
well, that, and but all kinds of, even people who are, the one I have listened to quite a few indigenous peoples and shamans
Yeah.
who seem to have this really, I mean, a very strong relationship, and have these sort of rituals and ceremonies and ways that they respect and really truly see the environment as them. So it's really anybody who's interest, or if you think you have things to say, to be a part of this conversation about the things that I've been speaking on, and if you can help expand, I have so much to learn still. I'm very much capable of guiding others, but I think the best teachers are students of their students. So I will continue to learn from my clients and for my clients.
Okay, so I think that beautiful like word. I feel like we are closing, coming to an end.
Yes.
Is there a last, some parting words that you want to
Yeah. Well, as far as career, I wanted to say, for people who are wanting a career in the spiritual realm, but don't really know what you want to be doing, or are not quite sure what your calling is. Like if one of those people who are feeling like, I want to figure out my soul's calling, I recommend just following your spiritual path. Don't worry about the career, because and let your spiritual path guide you, because once you start doing that, the pieces will start to come together for you. And that's because that's what happened to me once I let go of forcing the career, um and really just focused on how I could develop spiritually. The dots started being connected, and I now see like the things from my childhood to what I did yesterday all interconnect in who I am, what I'm doing, and what my soul's purpose is. So that's what I recommend for you out there searching for career guidance.
I love it. So let your let spirit be your career coach, basically.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Follow the spirit, and the career will unfold.
Yes.
Yeah, I love it. It's a beautiful message that you've embodied very eloquent. Well, yeah, that you have embodied and that you have narrated very eloquently. So thank you so much,
Thank
Corrina.
you. I really enjoyed this. I look forward to more conversations with you in the future too.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, maybe we'll have a conversation about the Akashic records. There's so much to say, and science, like we share a
Yes.
passion for, the science of spirituality through Nassim, and we are both, acquainted with the Akashic records. So maybe there's going to be a part two.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Corrina, and thank you everyone who've been listening to us all this time. And I love you all, and I see you next week for another conversation.
Thank you.
Bye.